Hey guys, today we're going to talk about ways to prove or show that a quadrilateral is a parallelogram. So we have 5 different ways that we can show this. The first one is going to be to show both pairs of opposite sides are parallel. This one should be fairly obvious because that's our definition of a parallelogram. So in showing that, we would see the arrows on the sides, double arrows on this side to show these two are parallel to each other. Another way is by one of our theorems that we know, we could show both pairs of opposite sides are congruent. So in this case, instead of the arrows, we replace those with tick marks to show that the opposite sides are congruent to each other. A third way would be to show that both pairs of opposite angles are congruent. So in this case, we would have the arc marks in the corner. One way that we have not talked about would be to show that one pair of opposite sides are both congruent and parallel. So in this case, we would just have the parallel arrows across from each other, and then on that same side, we would have tick marks across from each other. So if we knew that those sides were both parallel to each other and congruent to each other, that's enough information to tell us that yes, it's a parallelogram. The final way is to show diagonals bisect each other. So if I draw in a diagonal here and a diagonal here, we would need to show that they cut each other in half. So these guys would get a single tick on each side and then a double tick on this side because they're not congruent to each other, but they're cutting each other in half. Okay, so then this says, what methods can you use to show that a quadrilateral is a parallelogram? So we're just looking at the picture to determine which picture does this look like. And to me, I see that there's a congruent symbol and a parallel symbol on one pair of sides. So our answer here on number 1 is that one pair of opposite sides is congruent and parallel. One pair of opposite sides is congruent and parallel. Notice I'm using some symbols there. I'm shortening it. You can write it all out if you want. All right, number 2 looks like we have the diagonals being cut. So both pairs of diagonals are bisecting each other. So diagonals bisect each other. All right, number 3, I just see tick marks across from each other, so that tells me congruent. So both pairs of opposite sides are congruent. Now if I look at number 4, I have a couple different options here. I see that the opposite sides are marked as the same length, so that tells me that both pairs of opposite sides are congruent. Or I also see those parallel arrows on one side, so that would be that one pair of opposite sides are congruent and parallel. Either one of those would be acceptable answers. All right, if I look at the next one, I see angles marked, so both pairs of opposite angles are congruent. And again, I look at number 6, I see there's opposite angles marked again. So same thing here, both pairs of opposite angles are congruent. Okay, for what value of x is the quadrilateral a parallelogram? So we see that one of the diagonals is bisecting the other. If we have a parallelogram, we know that both of the diagonals should. So to make this a parallelogram, those two lengths would have to be equal to each other. So we would do 9x minus 31 equals 4x minus 1. So I'm going to add 31 to both sides. So I get 9x equals 4x plus 30. I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides. So I get 5x equals 30. I'm going to divide by 5. And I get x equals 6. And it just asks for what value of x. So we're finished there. We don't need to plug anything back in. For this last one, how would we make that a parallelogram? Well, we would know that opposite sides or opposite angles are congruent to each other. But we also know if it's a parallelogram that consecutive angles are supplementary to each other. So then 5x minus 10 plus 12x minus 14 would equal 180. So I get 12 plus 5 is 17x, and then I get minus 10 minus 14, so I get minus 24 equals 180. I need to add 24 to both sides. So I get 17x equals 204. I'm going to divide both sides by 17. So when I divide by 17, I get x equals 12. All right, so that's all I have for you today. If you have any questions, please come in and see me. I will see you in class.